Hello and welcome to More Technology, More Problems, managing ever more complex environments with fewer resources. Today's webinar is sponsored by Quest and produced by ActualTech Media. My name is Scott Bekker. I'll be your moderator for today's special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have dedicated Q&A at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is going to fix most of your audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. In the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and those include a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to ActualTech Media's great printed resources about technology topics. There's also a link there to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now, and feel free to share them with your friends and your colleagues. At the end of this webinar, we will be awarding one $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today, Mr. James Rico, who is Field Sales Consultant for Quest. And let me bring us up on video here for our conversation.
James, thanks for being here. So, James, our title is More Technology, More Problems. You know, we spend most of our time in IT talking about how great technology is, how adding the next thing is going to solve your problems. But obviously, that's only part of the story. You know, processors get faster, storage capacity increases, user devices get smaller, users, you know, collect more devices that they add to their group of things that they need to get their jobs done. And the one thing that rarely seems to improve is complexity. You know, and each advancement solves some problems, but it makes everything else more complicated. You know, you've got all those extra devices to track, additional vulnerabilities to protect against, additional storage to manage, and additional costs to control. So, you know, and another way that I like to look at it is, you know, new tech is always coming in the door, but the old tech rarely goes out, you know, so, you know, to make room for it. So, you know, the classic example, of course, is the mainframe. You know, we call those legacy systems, but they're still powering some of the most important functions, you know, that keep our society running. And another one that's probably more to the point for today's discussion would be tablets. You know, there were some early enthusiasts who thought they'd replace the PC or the laptop. Instead, of course, they didn't, and now many of us, you know, have both. And meanwhile, for the IT department, that complexity challenge comes without a big increase in budget or a bump in headcount. So I'm looking forward to talking to you today about some of those factors that are driving those issues, and then talking about some of the things that Quest is doing with KACE that helps IT pros, you know, take command of their environments, you know, try to, you know, deal with all that sort of chaos to bring it into some semblance of control. So I wonder if you can start us off by walking us through sort of what you see are the key challenges, you know, as you think about this, you know, every day, all day.
Sure. Thanks. And glad to be here today. Just before I dive right into this, I was on a call yesterday with a customer and I asked him, hey, what's your estimated lifecycle replacement for your laptops? You know, thinking he was going to say 3 or 5 years. His answer was when they die. So, you know, things do tend to stay around to kind of mirror back that point. And then, yeah, you still got to manage them. So,
yep.
But yeah, so, yeah, back to the topic here. You know, some key challenges we see out there, you know, increasing complexity, which again, you stated, things are not getting simpler from a management perspective. Maybe from an end user perspective, things are less complex. You know, apps are easier to use for users and stuff, but there's a lot of management on the back end for that stuff. You know, another thing's changing hybrid workforce. and we'll dive more into each of these things, but we've all have seen that probably over the last 2 years. And now we're looking at a shift now again, probably back to the office.
Yeah.
Security, less things is easier to secure, but we're not going that direction. So, security is a big part of that. And really, productivity, getting the most out of the assets we have, and really how can we do that? And, most budgets are not increasing to manage things. It's here's new things, same budget,
Right.
get it done. So
Right.
yeah, those are the key things we'll talk about today. So with that, we'll just hop right in here. So complexity, already kind of mentioned this, but the amount of devices you have out there. Shift to the cloud, you hear that from everybody. We're moving to the cloud, or we have a cloud first priority. Rarely do you hear somebody know we're going to stay on-prem with everything. Occasionally we find those folks, but not very often. IoT devices, just a broad range of software, and there's not only managing that, but there's a lot of aspects to that as far as good stewardship around those. So we'll dive into each one of these and kind of talk about them. Devices, the number of devices per person, I don't see it getting less. I mean, on my desk right now, I have 5 computing devices that I can access data from. That may be a little, extreme. In my house, I don't know how many I've got. I'm a IT fanatic, so I got a lot of stuff. But your average worker or consumer also, they have tablets and cell phones, lots of things to manage. Then we got to think about, personal-owned devices, so BYOD devices, and company-owned devices. Company-owned, you can do whatever you want. You guys own it. So, but how do we effectively manage those BYOD devices, or can we? So that's a challenge for people. And then lifecycle management. How long do we want to keep things around for? Do we want to keep them till they die? Do we track them from when they show up to when they, we ship them off? So those are all kind of key things that we need to focus in on. And devices is definitely a big part of that. Love this slide. That looks, again, that's a picture of my desk. Not really, but it seems like that's a picture of my desk. So just what kind of devices out there that are on the internet? Wearables, cell phones, tablets, laptop, desktop servers, drones, maybe not.
Yeah.
But
I'd like to jump in with something here.
Sure.
I don't know if there's a term for this, but what do you call a BYOD that's not even brought to work? We're going to get into this remote workforce trend later, you mentioned, but BYOD stands for bring your own device. But when you've got devices that are at home and the workforce is largely remote, it's almost a whole other category. I mean, I've seen the terms IT consumerization, and then there's also personally owned, company enabled. I don't know if that's POCE or POKI. I'm not sure what the acronym is there, but it potentially doubles the devices that an IT operation has to contend with. An employee in a home office working on a spouse's laptop, or a family computer used for gaming by a teenager who maybe doesn't practice the best security when downloading stuff from the web. And in the old days, the IT team might sort of see some red flags, as far as devices that are sitting on desktops when they were walking around the office and people were sitting there. But now you don't even have that sort of, eyeball check. And, so all I'm saying is, you've painted a pretty chaotic picture, and like this picture itself is pretty chaotic looking, but I think it's even worse than that in some cases.
Yeah, I'd agree. Over the last year or so, my wife, her company, they had a bunch of people go work from home, and one person was having a lot of problems on their computers. Found out that the person was letting their child use it for games.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know what they did to it, but yeah, it's like there's a whole nother set of challenges. Like, not only something like that, but even you provide a device and they're on their network. Is their router secure? Is their router been hacked? But that's their point of entry to what you're doing. So
right.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider. And definitely, I, again, don't see the list of things that are IT enabled getting smaller, if anything, increasing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just the next slide here, BYOD versus company owned. What control, on specifically your school or work, they're touching your company's data. And that's really the concern if you think about it on a BYOD device. I mean, if they lose their phone, you want to be able to at least wipe it. Securely accessing things, per app VPNs. There's a lot of things that can be done, but the ultimate challenge is your data secure? Nobody wants to have that breach where they're on the nightly news and thousands of people's data was, nobody wants to be there. So it's definitely a concern. Shift to the cloud. Got a couple Gartner stats here. 85% enterprises will have a cloud first initiative by 2025. 70% of organizations using cloud service now plan to increase their cloud footprint. So, it is, enticing. Let's go to the cloud. We're not having to have infrastructure. We don't have to have people to do it. We don't have to pay for facilities. Those things all look great. But a whole nother, you go to the cloud, then, are those devices secure that are getting to that data in the cloud?
Yeah.
And, personally, I think you lose a level of control going to the cloud. When things are on-prem, just maybe lamenting the good old days, but you had total control over those things. They were yours. Yep. They were your puppies. I mean, it's a two-edged sword, right? But
right.
So shift to the cloud, again, just more places, more things to manage, more apps to manage, typically to get to those things in the cloud. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more about losing control. But and on that footprint side, what we're seeing too is that people are sort of expanding their footprint across two different axes. You've got on the one is increasing their use of public cloud infrastructure. So like IaaS stuff from AWS and Azure and others. But in the other direction, they're also making more use of these software as a service offerings, and and that's all about connecting from wherever you are on whatever device you're on, and that goes right back to that point that you're making about losing control.
And Quest has a number of software products, and a lot of our products are data protection and backup. I don't particularly cover those, but conversations with some of my coworkers, like a lot of people think just because it's in the cloud that the data is redundant, and it's not always. You still have to do due diligence backing stuff up. Again, that's not in my wheelhouse, so to speak, but just something to think about. Just because it's in the cloud, it's not always backed up. So you can have a loss in the cloud and still be out. So
very true. Yeah,
lots to think about there. Lifecycle management, kind of a boring topic on the face of things. Like you got to order stuff and retire it and track the dollars. But when speaking to customers, most folks we talk to don't have a good handle on tracking who they gave devices to, how much they paid for it, if there's a maintenance expiration date. Again, it kind of sounds like really non-tech information, but you need a way to easily kind of get to that.
Right.
If I'm planning my budget for next year, it's helpful to know half my laptops are out of warranty for the last 2 years. So when I go to the CIO and say, hey, I need this budget, and I have a spreadsheet that says, look, all these machines, and we're going to start having a lot of problems if we don't replace them now. Right. So really, lifecycle management and just having that information, potentially allows you to get more budget for your department. Here's information, here's data, here's real facts about where we're at, here's what we paid for things, here's things that are lost, stolen, retired, or we need to retire them because they're Windows XP and we're going to be in a world of hurt if we still run it. So kind of a lot going around with that, in addition to kind of just daily management, but kind of like the financial side of managing those assets is, very important. IoT devices, great fun. I love IoT. I got all kinds of things I can log into. At home, that's great. I think it's a neat hobby to have Raspberry Pis and things like that. From a IT administrative perspective, probably a nightmare from to having to keep track of things. I really think the biggest exposure here is those things just get on your network, or maybe you have a segmented network that they're on, which is a good first step and stuff. But what about things that are not supposed to be there? There have been plenty of hacks that somebody plugged a Raspberry Pi in somewhere and used that as an entryway. There's a hack that was back in Vegas where somebody hacked a smart fish tank or something and got access to their network. So, again, you can't always have, a control lever on every IoT device because you probably just don't have access to that from the manufacturer standpoint.
Right.
Very good idea to know that they're there at least and know what your footprint is, so you can, be aware of them. Again, if they're out of date, they're no longer needed, get rid of them. If they should be, it's knowing what you have so you can, take the measures that you can take to secure them.
Yeah.
Kiosks, smart boards, embedded devices, control and automation systems. I'm probably leaving things out, but there's just tons of things that are IT enabled, IoT devices.
Yeah.
And again, that number is just growing. So.
Yeah, and so devices are becoming so ubiquitous that we're starting to not even notice them. And this is where the real proliferation is, and where a lot of the complexity is hidden in environments. And you see these research estimates and projections on the numbers of IoT devices, and they're sort of like mind-bogglingly large. They become meaningless. Like I've seen like 500 billion devices by 2025 or 2030, and it's like, how do you even conceptualize that? But if we do bring it to a personal scale, like what you were talking about on a home network, I actually did this exercise, thinking about today, and like probably 12 years ago, my family of 4 had 5 or 6 devices connected to the wireless network. We had a few PCs, an iPad, a couple of iPods. And, today I'm thinking, 4 smart TVs or Rokus or Fire Sticks. We've got 4 smartphones, 5 PCs, 5 of those Amazon Echo pucks, a garage door opener, a smart thermometer, 2 smart plugs, a couple of tablets, a doorbell, 2 lighting units for being on camera at my office, at my desk there, an Xbox and Nintendo Switch, and a cup that keeps my coffee warm. And you mentioned a couple of things that I didn't even think about. There's an Apple Watch that I think connects. It may just connect to the phone. And then I do have a Raspberry Pi device as well. So we're at like 32, 33 items compared to 4 or 5, a little over a decade ago, and so, and most of those are more IoT than traditional, computer.
Right. Yeah.
You certainly have to get onto a computer to manage them through the web. And that's a household. And you mentioned some of the business cases, but you start looking at things like tagging livestock or tracking fleets of vehicles. And I mean, you're talking orders of magnitude more devices, than people were, considering before. And at one point, Gartner was estimating that, 25% of attacks on businesses would come through IoT. And, I don't know when that projection was or what it was, what time frame it was for. So I don't know that we're there yet, but it certainly seems like something that you've got to be aware of, is that there's all these devices out there, and attackers are smart, and they're going to, start to figure out ways to use those to get in, and IoT is definitely going to be a lot to manage and secure.
And most of those are running Linux of some flavor on the back end now. I mean, there's other stuff, but a lot of Linux. Windows embedded devices. So anybody with cash register, that's Windows embedded typically. So things you can hit. And you can update those. So those can be, you can manage update. If it's Windows embedded, you can do it. Linux, if you can get automated to it, get a login to it. Again, some of that stuff's locked down. You won't have permissions to get to it.
Right.
But, awareness, I think, is a big, first step. Being aware of finding those things that are on your network, being aware of them, and then devising a plan of, kind of how to manage that risk.
Yeah.
Going forward. Yeah, I haven't counted up how many personal devices I have that are on the network, but I have about 200 plus because I've got multiple subnets set up in my router.
I figured your network would be bigger.
I got tons of stuff, and then I'm playing with virtual machines and everything. So it's crazy. Maybe that'll be a good poll question at the end here. We'll ask how many people. Everybody think about it. How many personal devices do you have at home? We'll queue that one up. Software. So kind of, we got multiple app stores to manage. So that's not shrinking. Different types of applications. We have subscriptions, software you can buy it, you can subscribe to it. Some things we focus on when we talk to people about software is, from a security perspective, is it updated? Is it regularly updated so you don't have out-of-date software, it's vulnerable? And the other big one is, license compliance. So when you think about, getting a potential audit, those are not cheap. And there's kind of a lot of things that can go along with that, cost-wise. The time and personnel, if you're not ready for an audit and you get one, I've heard people six months to a year to get completed with it. How many hours are sunk into that, and how many dollars per hour is that costing you from an audit perspective? If there is, if you failed in some way, you're going to buy more software seats. There's going to be some kind of settlement, probably some kind of fines or whatever. And not to mention that, then you're looking at regulatory type things. So, different municipalities, or depending on where you're at, there may be different laws for privacy and regulations where you can get software from or sell. There's a lot of things going on there. So software is a big one in addition to hardware. I think a lot of people are aware of it, but maybe not implement a plan to be on top of it. Usually folks will manage their operating system patches at least. You regularly don't run into an IT administrator at least doesn't have a WSS server running, even if they're not happy with the results. But we see a fair amount of people that, what about third-party applications? And we just let them update on their own. Not a great stance. So a lot going on here. Definitely software is a big one, and we'll look at how we can address some of this stuff here in a bit. Fun one here. I love this topic. The workplace has changed. So remote workforce, staffing levels, the Great Resignation. I don't know if people have heard of that, but we'll kind of dive in and look at some of this. Before COVID, your workplace probably looked like this. There's cubes and people were in an office working and getting their work done. Managers back there in their corner somewhere. What's that look like now? I'm more like the guy on the right. A little more laid back, got some shorts on or pajamas. But there's a whole host of challenges around that, right? How are they working when they're at home, or are they getting things done? So there's productivity considerations, but really just added complexity. So I know when one day we had folks all in the office, and the next day people were grabbing monitors and laptops and walking out the door and heading home.
Yeah.
Tracking of devices kind of was like, whoop, who got what? When in the office, there's no monitors on the desk anymore, or half of them were gone, half were not gone.
Right.
I remember supporting one of my salespeople that couldn't figure out what cables to plug into what to get their monitor going with their laptop. That was a fun challenge remote. So, but yeah, definitely, COVID was a big shift for a lot of folks. And, just staffing levels. Over time, I've been doing this for a while now, and when I talk to IT departments, they've got the same amount of people as I maybe talked to them 5 years ago.
Right.
How many more things are you managing now versus 5 years ago, and have the amount of folks you have working for you changed? Does it increase, stay the same, or decrease? It's either, most people I've talked to, it's static, or they have fewer people.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. And a lot of times with the complexity of, all the things we're doing now, you may have a tool for Mac, a tool for Windows, a tool for your phones, whatever things you're doing. There could be multiple tools for each operating system. So really, you spend a lot of time managing your management tools. That's something we see. We spend a lot of time just learning how to manage an application that manages your applications or your devices, and definitely affected by staffing levels. And then we also seen that, the Great Resignation. People over COVID have experienced people might have got hired out to somebody else or got fed up and retired. So then there's, how do we handle bringing new people in, either for your staff, or there's a flood of new people coming in that are,
right.
You're managing new people constantly. So there's a churn of the setting people up, onboarding, offboarding. How do we keep that managed and effectively do that without getting buried underneath that extra level of work due to external influences, COVID.
Yeah, and the Great Resignation kind of loops back to the COVID and before and after, just in terms of retaining staff. Even like if the IT department, you're not getting budget to hire people, but it's funny. I've been in a home office for 21 years, so I've always been an advocate of sort of that work style. And it was frustrating to me to sort of watch the lack of progress. You'd look at the numbers, and they would change very slightly in terms of how many employees were spending any time at home. And then you had one here in the U.S. you had 1 week in March 2020 where it flipped, and suddenly everybody who could leave left the office, and so you had inertia previously, keeping you in the office. And now, the inertia has kind of shifted over to the other side. Just read an article this morning about, or this week about, all the things that, Google and Microsoft and Meta are trying to do like they're throwing parties and having concerts to try to get some people to come back in just like 3 days a week. And it's a challenge for them. And so it's really difficult to know how this is going to shake out. It really, everything changed, and it's really unclear.
And I've kind of seen the same articles and stuff where they can't get people that want to come back into the office.
Yeah.
And then if your competitor is letting people work from home, you can't really force that on them. So from an IT perspective, I think we're going to be managing these folks working from home at least hybridly going forward. I don't see going back on that trend.
Yeah.
So it's, again, just from, IT asset management perspective, keeping track of things, staying on top of who has what, and now you're shipping stuff directly to people. Whereas in the past, they walk up to your office and you hand them something, or you bring it to their desk. It's like, well, that's not happening anymore. So you're directly shipping it from your preferred vendor. And then how are you going to manage that once that happens? So we'll talk about that. But that's another thought. If, you want to do shipping from whoever you buy your computers from to your office, you set them up, you want to ship them back out, and how many days, and is something going to get lost and UPS missed it or somebody picked it up off their porch? There's already enough risk in that anyways. So fewer kind of touches with that's better, for sure.
Great points.
Yeah, it's just kind of like talking about security. So, inventory management, you can't secure what you don't know. That's been a thread already we've been talking about. Finding vulnerabilities in what we do have, making sure we can manage patching. We run in the least privilege environment. All those things are kind of more traditional bread and butter. People kind of understand that. But we really, in the light of everybody working from home, can we do all these things while they're out? They're not in our office. We still need to do these things.
Yeah.
So, again, we kind of already talked about, productivity. Managing less management tools is a good start. Workforce enablement, ideally we ship somebody, they log into their device and they start working, which we got a way to do that. So we'll show you that. But, we need to be able to quickly enable our workforce so they can get to work. And there's not days spent waiting for somebody to get access to something, set up apps on their device, or they're not waiting for their device. So there's a lot of things we can do there to be more productive. Now some fun stuff. Actually show some product.
Let's take a look.
Cool. All right. So we'll jump in here and look at our KACE systems management appliance. So KACE is a virtual appliance. So what's nice about it is spin up is quick and easy. So you can spin it up. It's a virtual appliance. Just choose your favorite hypervisor, download the files, and turn it on. And really what KACE is good about is, finding those things in your environment. So we can come in and do a discovery schedule, and we have a number of types of queries we can run to look for, and you can do any or all. But basically, you can do like a ping or Nmap or an S&P scan. So we can set a discovery schedule up to go look for machines in my environment. And you can run that on a regular basis to maybe find those things like a Raspberry Pi that may have been connected. So we'll, the results will return will look like this. Some devices have already connected to. But once you find things in your environment that you want to manage, you want to connect to, then we're going to connect to those devices, and we're just going to do a thumbprint on it. So we can connect to Windows, Linux, Mac, Android, iOS, printers, routers, switch, SNMP type devices, so printers, routers, switches, and they'll all show up on our device page. So you'll be able to connect to, automatically inventory, and then track changes against devices. So I'll pull up a laptop here, and integrated with this, so we have a device inventory, which a lot of people may or may not have that. But one of the things that we do kind of above and beyond a lot of our competitors is actually integrate that asset management aspect to the product. So if we're looking at this here, I got an assign to field with the edit button here. So I can take, when I onboard an employee, I can assign a device to them, and it stays their device until you change it to somebody else. So we kind of link asset records to inventory information. So we'll query that endpoint. So this is, it's a Windows 10 machine. If I come down here, I can see, here's my service tag, my model, information about like your TPM chip. Is it, ready for Windows 11? Warranty information. So start and end dates on warranty. Information about the operating system. So what release of Windows, Mac, Linux, what version you're at with that, uptime, when it was installed, who's logged in, you can see encryption status of your device. It's really, again, just a good thumbprint, all the software that's installed. And we'll take that software information and kind of give you a global view and let you track licenses against that, so you can see how well you're doing with license compliance. Running processes, startup programs, services. So if you need to look for a group of machine, maybe running a certain service, we've got a global view of services. Same thing with startup programs, processes. We're really good at grabbing data about the endpoints. Some of the important information we do is under the security tab here. What's the patch level of that device? So we actively manage patching for, for your Windows devices, third-party applications, Linux security updates. We can update your Macs and their third-party software, and report back how well things went, and time and date stamp, and when it's actually deployed. So kind of having a nice audit trail for things is one of the things we also do, as well as vulnerability scanning for Windows, Linux, Mac, Windows feature updates. We can manage that. Windows Defender information, so you can initiate a quick scan. You can see when the last scan was, if there's any threats that were found during that scan. And then, down at the bottom here, we have our asset information, which we'll dive more into that here in a minute. But, at a, starting level for what we do here in KACE is, inventory asset management. So if it's a switch, a laptop, desktop server, a cell phone, whatever that may be, we're going to give you information about that and, track what's going on with that device, as well as, who you assign it to, things like that. We also I mentioned earlier, we'll track software. So we have a software catalog. We maintain, we have a team that maintains that and keeps it up to date. We randomly sample looking for new software on a, constant basis. So if it's commercially available software, it would show up in here. And a few key things we do, and really this is great for audit compliance. So we not only look for installed software, but if an executable is on that disk anywhere, even if it's installed or not, we'll be able to tell you it's there. And we actually have another view that will show you if it's installed also, like just installed or if it's just on that device. But a lot of times if you get an audit, whoever's auditing you, if that executable is on that machine, even if it's not been installed, they'll count that as an installed seat against an audit. So having that bit of information, you can go clean stuff up or delete or remove things, prior to getting that audit, so you don't get dinged when one happens. And also you can tie this into, blocking software. So if you don't want somebody running uTorrent, you can do, blocking. You can track usage, how often something's being used. So a lot of things going on there under inventory. Asset management is, again, kind of that financial side of the inventory, right? So when I made a purchase, what did I buy, how much did I pay for it, that type of information. You can set up your locations. We can do imports of assets. We can track all kinds of things in here. Devices or computers, like we're already been talking about, like things we can connect to. In addition to that, are you signing agreements for extended maintenance, warranties, leases? And if you do that, do you want to track that lease against all the devices that are part of that lease? So I could look a machine up and see, hey, this is a leased device. Or I could look up the lease contract, say, here's 100 devices that have been leased. And you can track other things, so non-IT assets, or things you can't log into, like a docking station, a monitor, furniture, handheld radios came up recently in conversation. Anything of value that you'd want to track, you can plug it in here. If it's got if it's got a dollar amount, your organization has bought it, there's probably a good chance somebody wants to make sure it's still there at the end of the year, and this can help you do that. So we can track all your assets, even if they're non-IT, in one place. And then they're in here. We can assign people to own things. We can make sure when we onboard or offboard folks, who's receiving those things. Did they turn it back in? If you need to do a physical inventory or at somebody's, you went to a branch office, we got a mobile app where you can scan a barcode, pull up information about that asset, and even do management functions against it with our KACE Go app. So a lot going on in asset management. And but kind of the net of that is you're tracking the dollars, right? The dollars and cents and where they're going and where they should be. We also do software distribution and scripting. Probably could spend an hour just in here going over this, but basically if we can automate, pushing out any type of script or application that said device will support. So if it's a Windows, MSI, EXEs, batch files, those types of things, PowerShell, whatever applications you'd have, Linux or Mac, you can do, bash scripts, push those out. We can push out, PKG files. So kind of lots going in, a lot of details. I won't dive into that, but basically ensuring people have the applications they need when they log in. And then if we jump down and kind of look at security, full patch management, Windows feature update management, vulnerability scanning, we got Oval and SCAP, Dell updates, Linux security updates, so we can update your Linux boxes. And not only do we do these things, we also, everything we do, we're going to validate. So if we're running a patch management job, and we got a patch catalog here that shows how compliant things are, we're going to be able to, not only do that. So we're not just telling Windows, hey, go update yourself. We're actually scanning that machine with a list of patches that you want to push out. If they're not there, we're going to deploy it, and then we're going to validate they installed. And that can be for the operating system and the application patches. So when you want to see how well things went, there's a lot of views on that. And I think this is one of the real important things we do. I can come here and search a patch ID or package name and instantly know, it'll pull up, and I'll know how compliant I am across my organization for an individual patch. I can't remember what the percentage is. There's a high percentage of exploits that are already fixed by, there's already a patch there, but there just hasn't been patched. And some exploit hits. Microsoft releases a TechNet article with, here's the CVE, here's the KB that fixes that. Sometimes people just want to know, hey, am I covered or not? And high-level, C-level people want to know. It's nice if you can come in here and just do a quick search. Yeah, we're compliant. We're 99 out of 100 are good. So again, there's a lot of details, nooks and crannies we can look at. Net, we're really good at making sure you're compliant with your patching. KACE also has a built-in service desk. Nice thing about this, unlimited usage. You can set up unlimited queues. So you can manage the kind of personnel side of things. They make requests, want to buy stuff, onboarding, offboarding. We can do, track all that. We also can set up where folks can use, you have an HR team wants to be able to manage their tickets, you can do that. So again, a lot going on in here, but it comes as part of that. For, one of the scenarios we'll talk about, and I know we're probably getting close on time here, all the stuff you see here can be implemented remotely. So a number of ways to do that. So we can leverage Autopilot for Windows. On the Apple side, DEP enrollment, if you buy a bunch of devices, most companies will can link that. If you have Azure AD, on the Windows side, they can upload those serial numbers into Microsoft for you. They're set up for autopilot. User logs in. We configure that device, drop our agent on there, and you're fully managing it. And they've never, set foot in the office. So, I'll probably stop there. A lot going on. We're happy to talk more at a later time. I'll put a link up here in a minute for you guys. But yeah, I think I'll stop at that point. Scott, any last thoughts before we kind of move to the next section?
No, I mean, that's a really powerful tool and really well thought out. I like the look of it. Perfect. Thanks for that demo. That was fantastic.
Yeah, no problem. I'll go ahead and share out real quick. We have a link for 14-day trial. If anybody's interested, they can scan the QR code and get directly to that. But yeah, it's great talking to you, Scott. I had a great conversation today and really appreciate it. I think we're gonna have some poll questions and some Q&A next.
Yeah, let's get into the audience questions now.
Yeah. So in that first. The first thing that I want to put up here is we did quickly pull together this poll based on the conversation that James, that you and I had earlier. So how many devices is your home network supporting? So my level, a Scott level, is 1 to 50 devices. Derek is he's a AV tech guy for us here at ActualTech Media, and he was helping me put this poll together. He's like at the 51 to 150 device level. And then James, we put you in the 151 plus level. So just for fun, let's see.
Well, we got a bunch of tech guys on here. So I figured they would all be like way over the 150 plus, but maybe they get tired of work. Don't bring it home.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the audience questions while we let that one run. Actually, let's wrap that one up. So what we got here is about 60% of people are at my level of 50 devices or fewer, at least that they know of. Billy mentioned in the Q&A here that he's not sure how many devices his kids have snuck onto his network, so maybe he's higher than he realizes. The Derek level at mid range is like 24%, and then James, you're in the top 15% there. You're in elite territory as far as size.
And I got stuff in the garage stacked up, not even plugged in yet too. So I can add a few more.
All right, and I'll put up the next poll question. Just something interesting to talk about. You currently have an asset management program in place, and let me leave that one up while we get into some of the questions here. So we have a question, James, from Warren, who's asking. The issue we have is keeping track of all of our devices. That's funny, just what we polled about there a second ago, but not managing just inventory control. Do you have suggestions on how to keep track of the devices we purchase?
Well, obviously, I just showed you our product here, but basically, even before talking about products and stuff, is really have policies in place that folks follow. So I've talked to a lot of different people, a lot of different sizes and types and organizations. There's some folks that have, anybody with a P card can go buy a piece of IT equipment. You got a manager in a department decides they want an iPad, or somebody needs something. Literally heard of people running down to Best Buy and grabbing something, and then, hey, guess what, IT, you have something else to manage. Well, it's not even enterprise grade or whatever. There's a lot of that that's going on. So really, before you even talk about technology or how to do it, have a plan. Make sure you get buy-in from everybody else that can impact it or is impacted by it, and then find something you like that works, that you can get all those devices in one place. And the more discovery that thing can do, the better. And also, you have to be able to manually add stuff, because a lot of times there's things that you can't connect to, but they cost money, so you need to track them. So ideally something that could connect to devices and allow you to bring other things in. And there's also software licensing. You want to make sure you're tracking that for sure, because that opens you up to audits and whatnot. So
gotcha. All right, great. Hey, and let's see where we wound up on that question about the asset management program. Looks like about 64% do have one, and 36% don't. So about 2/3 with asset management programs in place. What do you think about those results? Those jibe with what you see out in customer engagements?
Yeah, that's maybe a little bit higher. I mean, I typically, of course, I'm not taking a poll when I'm talking to folks. Usually about half the people I talk to have something in place. Typically, the larger the organization, they're a little more in tune to keeping track of everything. Some smaller organizations actually have heard quite well, we got a spreadsheet, we can keep track of whatnot. And if it's a one-man shop with 20 users, they don't typically see that as a big need. However, if they ever get an audit or whatever, they quickly find out it is. The people that typically are on top of the asset management thing, or somebody has had some kind of audit or compliance audit of some sort happen, and those people typically do have something in place. But yeah, that's
Gotcha.
not far from what I would think it would be there.
Yeah, and you mentioned audits, so let's skip to that poll question there, and then we'll come back to a previous one. But have you ever been on the receiving end of an audit? So let's leave that one up there for a second, and then we've got a question here from Neil. This is an interesting question. Neil's asking, do you feel that certain skill sets are slipping off sysadmin's resume, like being a Unix admin who knows how to troubleshoot issues with the OS in the cloud and just let the cloud providers do those services? Neil's background is a self-taught Unix admin from the last century. Who finds that many folks who are new to IT barely know how to do OS CLI commands and help and support, even with the title of sysadmin. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that's probably true. We have a whole generation of folks that have done everything, grew up with cell phones, point and click apps, web interface type stuff. So yeah, I see that as that. And then the push to the cloud, where the cloud providers are doing all the heavy lifting, so to speak, and people are just having to kind of log in and use what is there. So there's, pros and cons for everything. And there's so many more things to manage now, like so many more platforms. So, you've got Apple and Android, not, Windows and Linux and your Unix, myriad of flavors of that. And frankly, being an expert on all those is, if you are, more power to you. You're smarter than I am, or half the people I know. It's generally what we see is a lot of IT departments are staffed with people who are, not saying disparagingly, but, kind of IT generalists. They've got a good grasp of concepts and, know a whole bunch, it's kind of spread. They know enough to work on different platforms, but a lot of times that, depth of knowledge isn't there where it may have been in the past, where somebody was a Unix administrator and they lived in that thing day in and day out.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, I've run into that quite a bit. I mean, and I think we'll see more of that as there's more of a shift to cloud, where, you're not really diving into the nuts and bolts of things. You are helping end users out with the 23 devices that they have that they access their work data from. So yeah, that's a true statement, I would say.
Right. Okay, great. Hey, let's take a look at where we are on this poll. So, the question, have you ever been on the receiving end of an audit? We had about almost half, 46% said yes, 23% said no, and 30% said not yet. So cautious no's.
Yeah, I would have thought that either been all yes or all not yet. Those folks in the no column. You need to shift it down to the not yet answer. But anyways, yeah, fun question.
Gotcha. Yep. And then let me pop up another poll question here about how often do you need to account for inventory IT assets. And I'll leave that one up for everybody for a couple of minutes. And next question comes from Julie, and she's asking, does this have an integration with Servicenow?
So we don't have a direct integration with Servicenow, but we do have a REST API, and you can enable database access, so through an OBDC connection. But typically what we find is Servicenow is pulling our inventory data. So they're looking at our inventory and asset information and pulling that in and kind of using it in conjunction with, their service desk offering and stuff. So KACE is really good about inventory information, and there's some we didn't have time to do it in the demo, but you can actually build like custom queries and stuff you can put in there. So we do that really well. So normally if folks already have a service desk in place, because those are tough. If you already got one, you don't typically want to shift unless you just have to. So if they already got one, they need to get the inventory information or the asset information. They'll usually, extract that from KACE, as make that connection. But it's usually a pull, not really a push from the information. I believe last time I was up on Servicenow's website, they actually had a help section where they had instructions on grabbing our inventory data and pulling it up in there.
Okay, great. Next up, let's take a look at where this poll landed. So on how often people are doing these IT inventories, 10% at never, 20% at monthly, 32% at quarterly, and 36% yearly. So the percentages go up the longer the time frame, with the exception of never, which is the longest time frame, but that's also fortunately the smallest number there,
yeah,
which is a good thing. But what's your view on, like, looking at these numbers? What's sort of the best practice that you guys recommend?
Yeah, I mean, well, you kind of want to stay on top of it like all the time. I think the question there is kind of like, do you validate your inventory? Like, hey, this piece of equipment is at some location. So, I mean, it's kind of a continuous process, but I think most of the time what we see are folks kind of doing a true up, maybe, as needed, or at least yearly, more frequently. I think yearly or quarterly would be great. Again, if it's something like you're handing people laptops and they're onboarding and offboarding, you definitely want to, kind of do that as needed. But just like, hey, each branch or location, let's make sure those assets are there. Typically quarterly or yearly is a good practice. Definitely, if you have a software audit coming up, you'd probably prep that a little sooner, weekly or whatever, to get it done. But no, just some things would be kind of as needed. You have higher up set, hey, I need you to pull a report on some location or some piece of software or some piece of hardware. So you have a lot of ad hoc stuff that typically goes on. But as a general, a department-wide, yearly is probably typical.
Okay, super. Hey, and we do have one last poll question. We appreciate everybody's answers on these. It's fun to see where everybody is, and James, to get your perspective on what you're seeing from these answers. So this last one is, does your business have a decommissioning record for all IT assets if audited? And let's go to another question while we give people an opportunity to ask that or to answer that one. So this one comes from Jadeep, who's asking, how does KACE compare to Microsoft System Center, as it seems to do similar things?
Yep, great question. And that's probably one of our number one competitors. So KACE has, we looked at our management appliance here today, and we also have a MDM component, and they combine and become KACE UEM. Microsoft, is doing their System Center and Intune, and it's something UEM in the name also on their product. So we align pretty well, and we compete with them quite regularly. I would say ours is probably simpler to use, and it's kind of more heavier on the inventory and asset side, where a System Center is really not an asset product. There are some overlap. There are some things that they do, we don't do. But generally speaking, I would say, what's KACE great at? It's inventory and asset management, as well as, typically KACE is implemented in under a month. Like it's a single virtual appliance. You can spin it up, grab the agent, put it in a group policy, and you've got inventory information almost instantly as soon as people log into their devices or that group policy update. So pretty quick. to stand up and use, and a lot of happy customers. So if you're making a consideration of some sort of product like that, we'd love to talk to you.
Okay, great. And let's go to the results of this last survey here on decommissioning. It looks like it's pretty close to 50-50, just leaning slightly toward yes versus no. Why is that decommissioning record so important?
Just, green resource stuff for one. Data protection. Are you making sure those disks are, nobody can get at that data? I actually had an opportunity to visit they're actually a reseller, but they would go around to universities and buy old equipment. And, part of that was certifying what happened with those assets. And, but it was very interesting to see. It was a huge place and had literally huge carts full of RAM and monitors and whatnot, but all that stuff has to go somewhere. And, again, it could be for potential, different regulatory compliance did you dispose of things properly? So, keeping track of that e-waste. Obviously, we can recycle the best way, but, keeping track of that. So that's something, if you get a certificate of decommissioning from somebody, so you had some organization take it off your hand, you can actually archive that, those set of assets within KACE. So they're still in the database. They don't pull up in current queries, but you could, link that, upload that file, link it to a software contract, and, you can title it, and that could be linked to whatever assets were associated with it. So you can pull up that, that contract for recycling or decommissioning those devices, and you can see every device that was linked to it. So good idea to be able to do that type of thing. So if I'm, make a purchase, I bought 100 laptops. Well, which 100 laptops are they? So you can track it from when I bought it and how much I paid for it to, hey, I got rid of it. Here's how I got rid of it, and kind of everything in between with the asset tracking. You do that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Hey, and James, it looks like we're running up on time here. There were so many great questions that came in, and unfortunately, we could only get to maybe a quarter of them or less. But I don't know if you have the opportunity to get back to some of these folks afterward.
Yeah, we will. Yep.
Appreciate it.
100%.
So I did just want to put the slide back up with the QR code, but if somebody wants to get started with KACE or find out more, what do you recommend?
Yeah, if they just want to scan that QR code, it actually will take them to the trial download page, and if they click on that, you'll enter your information, so you'll be able to download a trial, and then one of our reps can reach out to you, and if you have questions or just want to, talk to me some more, or one of the other SEs, depending on where you are, we'd be happy to visit with you. Pretty easygoing group. There's no high pressure tactics happening over here, so just want to help people out when we can.
All right, super. Well, James, thanks for a great conversation and demo, and for all your insights here in the Q&A. I really enjoyed this session with you.
Yeah, me too. It was great fun.
And finally, it's time for the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing, and the winner of that gift card today is Dave Muchnick from Tennessee. So congratulations to Dave. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the ActualTech Media team, I want to thank Quest and James for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.